make people laugh while you're doing it. Lenny Bruce, again. So I listen to them for the information on the two people running for president. And I still think, give Obama a chance. Everybody wants everything to happen yesterday. You know, and I know that. I'm very selfish, rock and roll star, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I want it now, I want it yesterday. But I also realize that something that's screwed up, and our country is screwed up, and I love this country, that doesn't mean it isn't screwed up, takes a while. And if you've got a Congress that's fighting you, it's going to take even longer.
Right.
You know, but the Republicans didn't seem to be quite as unaware during the 50s, Eisenhower years. My parents were both Republican. I liked them fine. And I would argue with them because I've been, I didn't know anything about politics or anything about any of that stuff until I met a guy who was a quiz kid in the 40s. Those are kids with brilliant IQ. And he was married to a friend of mine. We'd go over for dinner and we'd chat about things afterward. And he leaned over to me one time and he said, you know, you've got a really good brain, but there's nothing in it. He said, here, and he handed me about 5 books. He said, I want you to start reading. He handed me The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire and stuff, Hegel, Kant, Schopenhauer, stuff like that. And he was so good looking that I wanted to impress him. So I read all this stuff. I started reading and now I haven't stopped since. But when I read all of this different stuff, it occurred to me, I am a socialist. Because I really believe, and I'm not a socialist, we're not talking about, I don't think communism works. I didn't think so back then either, because you can't keep people from being individuals. But socialism, government thing, the people, for instance, in the Scandinavian countries, they went around and asked people, all different countries, they found out who are the happiest people, the Danes. Now you can have a king and queen, as well as taking care of all the people. They've got stunning social systems. The Scandinavians are not that funny. The only, and I'm Scandinavian, so I can, you know, but I've been to all the Scandinavian countries. But they're real smart, they're well taught, and the only funny guy that ever came out of Scandinavia is Victor Borge, and he's a Jew. So that's what I like about that kind of stuff. You know. But they have amazing taking care of their people systems. You pay high taxes, but you are well taken care of. Everybody wants taxes to come back down. We can't do that. It's like Clinton said, it's arithmetic. You know, you can't do that. And you can't tax middle class and lower class people because they don't have any money. That's rude. Tax people like me with an income of over whatever I don't even care what it is. Go ahead, tax me. I have done very well in this country. So guess what? I can give it back. And why not? There are people who, for whatever reason, have not been given the life I have. And it is up to me to help them live without being in poverty. Nobody in this country should be in poverty, and that could happen given the right, but nobody wants to give up their taxes. Well then, we were not one of the happiest people. The Danes are happier than we are. Well, if I wanted to run a country, maybe I'd go ask them, how do you do that? How do you run this country? And maybe the president and the first lady can be kings, they're sort of our kings and queens, but basically it's run by certain laws. And same thing with freedom of religion. In the Scandinavian countries, they don't care if you're black, white, Muslim, doesn't make any difference. The Muslims care because some Dane or somebody made fun, mentioned Muhammad or drew a picture of him.
Yeah, I think it was a cartoon.
And the people went nuts. Oh, come on, get a grip, you know. So all religions have their things where you want to say, you're a little out of line there.
Yeah.
But to allow people to just have a spiritual notion of one kind or the other without you stepping on it, unless they're killing people. That's probably not good. If you're killing people, we're going to get up on in your case. The same way you would an individual killing people. It's not a religion. Somebody, locally killed somebody, he's going to get arrested. But we don't have that. We have this kind of war machine that happens. And there's got to be something better than that, too. How can we get around that? People like war. Now, nobody wants to hear anybody say that. But there are certain bunch of people, and there's a lot of them, who actually like that. Patton was one. I like verbal war. In other words, China gets annoyed with her father because he's verbally warlike. I don't care. He calls up and he'll start arguing about something or other. And I think it's like tennis. I'll keep lobbing one across. He lobs one at me. I'll lob one back. If he gets too nuts or too ugly or starts doing personal stuff, I'll just hang up. I don't care. But I sort of like, and that is a kind of war. Chess is a kind of war. But those don't really hurt anybody, really. You want to argue forever, fine. But when you start punching people, now you're starting to get out of line because that hurts. You're causing them pain. And shooting people. Can't we settle anything better than killing each other? Are we that stupid still? I guess we haven't evolved that much. We still have a caveman nervous system. In other words, there's a lion at the front of the cave. No, there isn't. That's a driveway. There's nobody, So we still have this reaction rather than response. It's a reaction, which is usually violent. Oh, we better get a whole bunch of tanks over there. Sometimes you have to, but not as often as we think ought to happen.
Yeah. So, of course, earlier we were talking a little bit about China and that you think that maybe her openness towards religion or different religions probably comes from the environment of being in a rock and roll setting.
I think so. The music.
Yeah,
musicians are pretty much open to each other's stuff. And musicians have a pretty good sense of humor. So we make fun of each other and ourselves. So it all kind of evens out. I don't know of many musicians who would keep anybody from becoming, if you can play your saxophone, I don't give a shit who you are or what you do in your spare time. So I think being around musicians may have been it, because we never sent her to any particular kind of school. She went to public schools. She went to a private school, but didn't have a title. It wasn't the Baptist Children's Youth or anything. So she adopted, which I'm so happy, this open mind toward people. She waits until they put their foot in their mouth to not like them. And then she'll even sit back and think, well, now why did they do that? And give the opportunity for them to explain if they're there. But I'm really glad about that in her.
Right.
And she's less judgmental than I am. So I try to listen to her to improve my spiritual poses.
Right. Well, she's very bright, and I'm proud to say that I was a professor of hers at one point. That's how we knew each other and became friends.
Yeah.
And she's a very bright young woman, and obviously she's going to grad school now. And but going along with that that issue of the musical environment being very open and tolerant, it has struck me as very interesting that there was not only that the 60s were a time not only of social and political upheaval and exploration of different ideologies, but also exploration of religion.
Yeah.
Because obviously, not least of which the Beatles going to India and studying under the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And I remember opening up the Moody Blues album, In Search of the Lost Chord, and there's an explanation of mantras and yantras right there.
Yeah.
And of course you have people like Norman Greenbaum, a Jew, writing a song about Jesus. I got a friend in Jesus, that sort of thing. But it's so fascinating that in that time period, it seems that so many youth wanted to get away from the more traditional, stilted senses of religion that they had grown up with.
Yeah.
And yet many people still were gravitating towards Christianity, but in a more, what would you say, a more liberal sense, if I can use that word, not in a political sense, but in a theological sense, in a much more open-minded sense of Christianity.
Well, China is married to a Jew who goes to the Episcopal Church occasionally.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's all good.
Yeah.
And China and her husband live in, there's a big suite over the garage, and they live in that, and we all hang out, and we're all fine. We all make fun of each other and ourselves, and we can make fun of everybody, because basically we also like pretty much everybody. There are some jerks from every cultural situation, but for the most part, we know that. There are some neat people from here, and there's some jerks from here. There's some, and it's all the same. We're all human beings. We all make mistakes. We all have this kind of interest in how does this all work? This is all so wondrous that you go, how did that get that way? How does it happen that the sun works on these trees and that water works from the other end, and they produce these beautiful things, and then we will cut them down and make houses out of that for us, and then there are bugs. Stuff that gets us is not in a lion. It's something you see under a microscope. And those are so powerful that they mutate. We find some kind of a drug for them, and they will mutate. People, 25% of people who go into a hospital come out with something they didn't have, because the bugs in there are so strong that they live right through all the Clorox and everything else. So what's going to get us probably is something you see under a microscope rather than a lion or even a war. The bugs are stronger than any of that. And plus, they go away for long periods of time. The Surgeon General, Coop, said we've eradicated, and he named a bunch of stuff, and I wrote back to him, said, we haven't eradicated any of that. Cholera will come and go. It depends upon how dirty your soap is, or if you don't have any soap, and it's all still with us. You can get polio, you can get cholera, you can get tuberculosis. What are you talking about? You haven't eradicated anything. This stuff is too powerful, and you ought to know that. You go to medical school, or you know. But he said that in a tract that was talking about how marvelous animal testing was, and they're finding out that it isn't quite that marvelous because we're all different, even from person to person. There was a drug that's the closest I've ever come to death, and it's called Zomax. It's a minor anti-inflammatory, and I turned red, puking, couldn't breathe, throat closed. They had paramedics shove a wet towel down my throat. All this stuff went to the hospital. Doctor said, "What'd you have?" And I said, "I don't know. What'd you have for lunch?" I had a shrimp salad. And have you had any drugs yet? Zomax, minor anti-inflammatory. I said, "What's the matter?" And he said, "Well, they both present the same way." So for 2 years, I didn't have any shrimp or any shellfish. I'd never been allergic to shellfish. And finally, I had shellfish and nothing happened. So I said, well, he said, well, they took Zomax off the market. I said, why? He said, it was killing people. And I went, oh, okay. Why didn't somebody call up? They had computers then. Why didn't somebody keep track of it and call people up where they'd prescribe, you know? So that was the roughest drug I had. And pharmaceuticals kill more people every year than all the street drugs combined. You know, something to think about. That doesn't mean you should never take any drugs, but know that you're going into the middle of the circus with the elephant that's mad. Yeah,
it has its limitations.
Yeah, you might get out without the elephant stomping on you, and then again, you might not. So you have to kind of think about it. And how long has stuff been around? We're pretty aware of the things that happen when you snort cocaine. If you shoot cocaine, that's different. That's another story. Heroin, We know these drugs, opium, they've been around forever. Alcohol, it's been around forever. Marijuana. But the newer drugs, like acid, we studied that, and the guy who gave it to us made us read books, all these books, for a month before we took it. So he said, don't ever do it without somebody who is not high. So it was very rigid, and he's right. He was a chemist from Shell Oil who invented the glue that sticks those knobs to the street. So he had, excuse me, major amounts of money. Drove around a Rolls Royce. He's about 24-year-old chemical genius. And he had little suspenders, wide whale cords, pink cheeks, and he was brilliant.
Would we know his name? No.
No, his name was Brian, but
Oh, okay.
you wouldn't recognize him.
Wasn't sure if he was one of the famous people in that scene or.
No. Owsley, you know, you know about him. But he was a distributor. His girlfriend was the chemist.
I do want to talk about spirituality in your art, and of course, not only your visual art, but the musical art. So, in what ways do you feel that your music has embodied your spirituality and your search for spirituality, conveyed it?
Well, in any of the arts, actually, for me, this is not for everybody, but for me, I feel that some of it, some of the stuff you do is your own ability and things you were taught to do, and here's how you mix the paint, and here's how you draw a chin and stuff. But I've been surprised a number of times by the fact that a lot of this, music, whether it's music or painting or whatever it is, stage sets, I don't care, is a spiritual thing that comes through you. Because I don't have any knowledge of a lot of the stuff I do, but it comes together anyway, without my knowledge. I don't know how to read music. My parents got a piano teacher when I was little, and I play by ear. So I would say to the piano teacher, why don't you just play that for me one time so I get a kind of feel of it? So the next week she'd come and I'd play it for her, and there would be mistakes in it. But she expected mistakes. I was, 8 years old. But I didn't want to learn how to read music. It bored me. I'd rather just play it. And rock and roll, you don't have to be a genius to play rock and roll. It's not one of those outlets that require a lot of intelligence. So in rock and roll, or whatever song I'm writing, or writing a book, or painting, there's this thing that happens that's not nameable. Now I sound like a Jew. It's not nameable.
Baruch Hashem, yes.
Yeah, that's because this Yahweh comes through.
Yeah.
And you don't know where it's coming from. You just start doing stuff, and a lot of it is not your own knowledge. It is not something you've been taught. It is not, now they may come up with some genetic thing that certain people are born like an idiot savant. Something happens. People have been hit in the head too and come out, all of a sudden they can play the piano. What's that about? I mean, I don't even know, I have no idea. But almost all the artists I've talked to, whatever their art, have that feeling that there's this X factor, thank you, Simon, that comes through that is not necessarily yours to speak of. That is a spiritual deal. For me it is, anyway. I have an idea, my concept of the word God, or Yahweh, or Allah, is when people are atheists and I feel like arguing with them, I'll say, okay, China's father once said to me, I want to see a burning bush. I said, dear God, Paul, look at a tree. Just the fact that there's this seed or nut or something that comes out of the ground and does that, that's not enough for you? plus, he said, well, I can't see it. I can't see. I said, okay, turn on your television set. You can't see that going through the air, but somehow this electricity makes it so that you can see people moving around, you can hear all this stuff. It comes through the air and goes through this machine, and that happens. I said, the same thing, you can't see God or Allah or Muhammad or any of these people. But somehow things happen that are just spectacular. I said, a flower, the fact that you can make a baby, a whole human being, all of this stuff is spectacular. That is an action. And for me, God is this thing that happens, and it can happen to, around, and in anybody. And I think it is always happening. It is like a television. This thing is in the air that you don't see. It doesn't have a shape. And they say, well, is it a he or a she? I think it's better than that. It is an it that is so incredible. It's something that goes on that you can tap into. In other words, if you don't turn your TV on, you're not going to see that. You have to actually kind of go there yourself. And that possibly is what prayer is. Mm-hmm. Although a lot of people, you're praying for, I need more candy, or can I have another car or something. That's stupid. But to engage, I guess that's a better word, engage this stuff, this thing, this it. Probably why the Jews don't name it, because how can you put a name on something like that? It's just this massive occurrence and event that goes on all the time. That's the way I think of it. And that happens, I can see it better in form when I create. And when I'm not creating, I get kind of goofy, because that's my way of seeing it in form. So I get kind of nuts. And I used to always get drunk when I had a day off. Sometimes I get drunk and be on stage too, but it was more when we had some time off. And I should have kept on drawing, because I did that painting when I was very little. My parents said, I draw an angel and they'd make a Christmas card out of it or something. But I did that first, and I've always known I could sort of draw. And I'm not a genius at painting, but I don't suck either. So that's an option. I could do any of the arts except dancing. I'm a complete klutz. Set designing, writing, drawing, singing, I don't care. I don't care which art it is. If you said, I'm sorry, I can't paint anymore, I'd say, fine, then I'll be a set designer. I'm sorry, I can't be a set designer. Okay, all right. I'm sorry, I can't. Doesn't matter. I'll go through all of the arts. And I know I can. Mm-hmm. I also know how good I am or not. Mm-hmm. And it also goes up and down. Like Mona Lisa, I don't think is one of the best of his efforts. Right. I don't think everybody creates great stuff all the time. Sometimes you come up with something that's just stunning and it stuns yourself. You go, how did I do that? I'm not that good. Or, how did I do that? That's awful. I know better than that. You never know. The more you are able to work with the materials actually and know what they do. Blue works better than most colors in acrylic. I don't know why. Most colors you have to go over it twice because the thickness of it is staggered. And I don't know why blue works better than most of the other colors, but it just does. Some colors are just awful. They're all like, there isn't much color, and then there'll be this blob, and you're going straight with the thing, but the color doesn't work. So you have to do it a couple times over to get the right color. But to know that and know which colors work and whether or not to use them, because you might want a really good thing, so you use blue. All the blues are pretty good, except the dark blues, which are staggered. But knowing that kind of stuff makes it so that you can work a little faster, because you know about your materials. But the structure of things, or the decision to put something in or out, either of music or writing or painting, sometimes it's just how did that get there? How did I do that? Or how did you do that? Or how did anybody? You know, sometimes you just do stuff, and where did that come from? And I think it's that unnameable energy, and you can pull it into you and be real conscious of it, or you can totally ignore it. It doesn't matter to me what you do, but it seems to work a little better if you engage it, whatever it is. It seems to be conscious, you know, as well as creative. And it's just amazing to me that everybody is a little bit happier with knowing that that exists and that you can pull, you know, you can work with it.
Yeah.
It's really amazing.
Yeah. Now, you were talking about finding yourself being drunk more often when you weren't creating.
Yeah.
So do you think on some level that was a substitute for the spiritual, that when you weren't creating and having the direct contact with the divine and the spiritual,
Do you
that
know
it was
what they
almost
call alcohol? Spirits.
Spirits, yeah, exactly.
It's just a dumb spirit.
Yeah.
Ram Dass went to India, as he often did. He's actually Richard Alpert. His father was a big railroad magnate, but he turned to Hinduism, I believe. I'm not sure what the name of whatever he does, but it's Eastern. And he asked his guru about acid, and he gave his guru, there's a little fat guy with no teeth, sat around in a blanket, gave him 600 mics, I think it was. And he took it and he sat there for hours the way he was wont to do. And finally, Ram Dass asked him about it. What do you think? And he said, well, you can visit, but you can't stay there on this.
Yes.
And I thought, what an amazing thing to say.
Yeah.
And that's the way anything is. Alcohol, you can visit, but you can't stay there. So drugs will actually create a spiritual kind of thing going on sometimes. Even alcohol will create a spiritual thing going on, but you can't stay there. And the repercussions of alcohol, not so much acid. Acid's not, you come down by having a little wine, very little wine, and maybe some bread, because the bread eats the acidic stuff in your stomach and the wine kind of calms you down. But a lot of alcohol is really awful the next morning. Acid isn't quite like that. But all of those things are temporary, kind of.
Yeah.
You know, it's very temporary.
Yeah.
But a continuing drawing in an engagement, even though you don't know what it is or how it is or where it started or any of that, somehow that makes you feel better, but it doesn't have any hangover. So it's kind of an interesting drug, if you will. God is a drug.
God is a drug, yeah.
Okay, that's ugly. Yeah, but and I don't do that because I ought to, or because anybody's told me to, or because I think it's the right thing to do. I try to do stuff that works. You know, I have an electric car, all electric, no gas. And I like it. It works. And it's out there with a little hose in its face, sucking up the power. But like I say, I like the analogy from television to people who are questioning the existence of God, is that you don't have to see things. Everybody thinks that's solid. It's not.
Right.
Everything in this room, in this world, is mushy. And we say, even cement? Yeah, even cement. So if that's true, guess what else stunning stuff is true, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just spectacular. I love all the stuff that both science and spirituality, and they say, well, I think the Dalai Lama, China told me the Dalai Lama said, if science can prove that we're wrong, I'll talk to him. Instead of closing it down right away.
Right.
He's open to, well, yeah, let's find out what they have to say. That's good. I like that.
Yeah. He's an amazing human being.
Yeah,
He really
apparently.
is. Yes.
Because being that open and being the Dalai Lama, I mean, is the Pope going to say, if you can prove that the Catholic Church is a pile of shit, is he going to say, well, I'll talk to you about that?
Probably wouldn't.
You know, so the Eastern religions appear to be a tad more, well, they're older. They've been around longer. I mean, they've been around forever, you know. It's, so the longer you're around, the more you have a chance to evaluate things and find out what works and what doesn't work.
Right.
Even in AAs, they have you know, paragraphs how it works, and how they tell you how it doesn't work too. I did how it doesn't work for a long time, in and out, and because I am a periodic alcoholic. I don't drink every day, never did. I'll wait for, sometimes, like I said, I was sober all during the 80s. I'll go for 10 years without drinking. And it's all self-will, you know, what I want to do when I want to do it. And a lot of that comes out of the ethos in the 60s. We just did pretty much what we wanted to do. And nobody wanted to kill anybody, so that it wasn't like I had to sit around and say, geez, I can't kill that guy, damn it. I didn't want to kill anybody. It wasn't anybody I didn't like that, you know. And if you really hate somebody, why would you kill him? Keep him alive, torture him. You know, once you kill them, they're not feeling anything anymore. Keep them alive, call them every morning at 4 o'clock. I get up at 4 a.m. on my own. It's weird circadian rhythms. Always have gotten up early. And I told Paul that once because I was annoyed with him. I said, that's okay. I'll just call you every morning at 4 a.m. You know, just that, nothing more.
I better stay on your good side because you have my phone number now.
Yeah, just that. The rest of your life, 4 a.m. So I'm even more evil. I think sometimes women are just a tad more evil than men because we have to think up stuff like that doesn't require physical power because we're not strong as men. So we have to weasel our way around everything. And we can think up some bad stuff too.
So the symbol of the white rabbit keeps showing up in your paintings, in your artwork, as well as obviously being very iconic from the famous song from the 60s.
It's been there constantly.
Yeah.
I was born in the year of the rabbit. One of the things that made it through the fire that burned our house down in Northern California is a white rabbit. China, not because of that, calls her husband Rabbit. There's just been this rabbit thing, white rabbit basically thing, and the rabbits on the property too, all over the place, has been going on all my life. I lived next door to a guy when I was, for about 5 years, lived in San Francisco. And I've always loved cars, even as a child. He had an old Pierce Arrow, and I don't even know if you know what that is.
Vaguely.
Magnificent beast, you know, this old car. And about 40 or 50 white rabbits. And they didn't tell me what he was doing with them, which is good, because he was, you know, using them to sell for coats. I just thought he liked white rabbits. And I'd go over and play with his rabbits and sit in that magnificent car, and I was a happy guy. So lived next door to a guy with 40 white rabbits. The story of Alice in Wonderland is the only story that anybody read to me when I was very little that didn't have a Prince Charming in it. She had to do it herself. I think that's a real good thing for, not so much anymore, because I think women aren't quite as programmed to do certain things as they were. But I've always known that it wasn't going to be a you take care of me situation. Having to ask somebody for money to buy new shoes is just my idea of hell. I'm not, you make your money and you buy whatever you want with it. I'll make my money and I'll buy whatever I want, and we'll get together and have fun and screw and do things that couples do. Go out to dinner, go to movies, but I'm not, you aren't going to feed off me, and I'm not going to, and fortunately I've been married twice and neither of the men went for the California 50-50.